England versus India. The Cricket Badger Test Match Daily Podcast. Can Joe Root's England dominate on home soil? 5 mouth-watering test matches. Can Virat Kohli's India conquer the final frontier? Loving to talk test cricket every day.
Hello everybody, welcome along. I always have to make sure I'm not picking my nose or something by the time it actually flashes to me in the end. But welcome along. It is the Cricket Badger Podcast, England against India Test Match Dailies, and it is 5th Test Match Eve. Today we are looking forward to the Christmas Santa bringing us a joyful 5 days in Manchester. The rain is kind of like on the horizon. We nearly didn't have a test match at all. Joining me to talk about all things 5th Test Match England against India, we've got Mark Hilton, Rito Mitra, and Neil Varani. Let's start with you, Neil. Welcome back. Did you have a nice holiday?
Yeah, really good. And thankfully for me, you can get BBC Sounds out in Spain. So I had Aggers tell me what was going on at the Oval while I was away, which made it doubly good.
And I'm sure it was gleefully received in your ear holes as well. Rito, how are you today? Are you looking forward to the 5th test?
Yeah, I'm very good, James. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to England sparing the series going 2-2 at Manchester.
Rito is one of our English fan badges. You sound like you're down a well today, Rito, but we'll bear with you. And Mark, you are a Lancastrian. So it's kind of going back to your home territory. I had a massive thunderstorm in Bradford, just over the Pennines this afternoon. It came down probably, I don't know, but about 20 inches in about a space of about 5 minutes. Might be a slight exaggeration, but you get the drift. You were telling me this afternoon, because last time I think I was at Old Trafford for anything work-related, probably it was 4 years ago, something around that. And I can remember just sitting there watching a puddle developing on the outfield, and we never got any play. But you say it's better now.
Yeah, I think all that was cleared up. That was around about that test match time when they had a problem near the boundary edge. But yeah, that's cleared up. The drainage is fantastic. So when it stops, they play. So there'll be no problem. And the forecast has actually improved for tomorrow up there. So and the forecast for the weekend is okay. So we may get 5 clear days.
Fingers crossed, because this test match, I mean, we'll talk now about the fact it nearly never was, this 5th test match. And I think this test series deserves a full stop. It deserves the curtain falling on it properly rather than just everybody drifting away. But Neil, COVID, the second physio, I think, in the Indian camp, complained of some COVID symptoms on Wednesday. He was then tested, came out positive. So he's been kind of like bundled off into a dark room. The rest of the Indian squad, though, has been tested obviously since then, and thankfully no positive tests amongst the Indian players, but it was touch and go for most of today, wasn't it?
Yeah, and as always, in the absence of knowledge, then all kinds of crazy theories have been flying about. We've been
that's what we should call this podcast, the absence of knowledge. Anyway, so carry on.
But yeah, I mean, we were partaking of a few of those and discussing the likelihood and so on through the day between us on our WhatsApp group. But yeah, no one really knew what was going on. Was it the dastardly BCCI trying to get the Indian players away so they could prepare for the IPL on time?
Yeah.
Were England going to force India to forfeit so that they could get away with a 2-2 draw? It was that level of ridiculousness. For the record, no, the BCCI are clearly not going to do that. They wouldn't risk their players being exposed to COVID just to get over to the UAE a bit early. And the ECB were never going to push for calling the game off because, quite frankly, the financial implications of doing that would be horrendous to a board that's already spent all its reserves on the 100.
Just on your IPL point there, though, Neil, it's surely if you escape quicker, you lessen the risk of actually getting COVID, don't you? Because you're out the country and you're on your way. I mean, there is obviously an awful lot of money wrapped up in the IPL. But I mean, the reason that they kind of have bent over backwards to get it into the UAE, because a lot of other tournaments domestically, I mean, I don't know, say the 50 over Royal London One Day Cup got COVID riddled in the early stages of the season, you guarantee that ECB will just say, well, we'll just knock that on the head for this season. We'll move on to next time. You can't do that with the IPL because it is $1 billion industry, isn't it? So Saurav and co have been really trying to get this IPL on, and obviously it's now going to be in the UAE starting on the 19th of September. India was supposed to fly out of this country, England, on the 15th of September. Now, if you've got a load of positive tests in the hotel, you aren't able to fly, are you? And then all of a sudden, you've got the potential for the likes of Virat, Rohit Sharma, Jasprit Bumrah, some of the leading lights, some of the poster boys of the IPL being stranded in England and being left behind, haven't you?
Well, absolutely, and that's why some of those rumours that there was an attempt to get the match called off and sort of the COVID infections were a method to get that end result are so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Plus, no one knows what the effects of long COVID are. We've heard anecdotally that there are people who are still knackered months after they've actually recovered initially, and the assets that these players are, you can't afford to. We were properly down the rabbit hole in terms of ideas that were flying about the internet in the lack of any knowledge.
On that point, Neil, somebody I know who he got COVID last year, and he's still struggling. I think he was on local news talking about it because it basically has completely wiped him out. He does about 15 minutes and then he's tired again. And this is a person that used to be really active. Used to play in a band, used to be really active, used to be all over the place. Now struggles to actually do more than 20 minutes before having to go back and have a lie down. It's actually quite scary. And obviously, if somebody like Virat Kohli got that as a prized asset of the BCCI, that is not going to play well, is it? Rito, I mean, I'm sure you've been following what's been going on today. Let's see if you're out your well first. How have you interpreted today's events?
Yeah, I think both have handled the issue pretty well. Yeah, it's all right now, Jim.
That's absolutely superb. Carry on.
Yeah, both the boards have actually handled it pretty well. Obviously, the ECB wouldn't have just called off this test match as they don't have a lot of reserves to fall back on now. So the BCCI were looking to get back the players back to the UAE as soon as possible, but ECB said, no, we won this test and we won those points. Now, the England team has said that they will get Josh Butler back in the team, your favorite player, James, Josh Butler. And as long as Josh Butler has played...
It's a very nice man, Rita. Don't put words into my mouth, Rito, Mitra. I think Josh Butler's a fantastic cricketer and a very nice man. He just wouldn't be in my first Test 11. That's all.
He's back into the team, and probably one of Ollie Pope or Johnny Bairstow will drop out of the team. Johnny Bairstow, he has been England's second highest run scorer in this series. So whether you drop him or you drop Ollie Pope after scoring a very impressive 80 at his home ground. So these are tough decisions for England to take. And Jimmy Anderson, we are hearing even they might drop rest Jimmy Anderson for this test match after overbowling him at the Oval. So there are some pretty tricky decisions for the England team to take now ahead of tomorrow's game.
Getting back to the events of today and yesterday, Mark, I mean, I actually genuinely felt for most of today that there was a significant chance of this test match not going ahead, because we're not just talking about somebody that's kind of on the periphery of the Indian side. This is a guy who's had his hands on Mohammad Shami's legs. He's been treating Rohit Sharma. He's been treating Cheteshwar Pujara. All of the kind of walking wounded and the less so that just fancied a bit of a rub down have been treated by the physio. So he's been in close proximity to these guys. I mean, you talk about 2 meters. He's been basically all over them. So, the fact that they've got a load of negative tests is more look than judgment, really, isn't it?
Yeah, they've been lucky essentially. That's it, isn't it? We can't really. I don't think anyone can predict who's going to catch COVID from who else. And we just know it's very contagious. But obviously, they've been exceptionally lucky in terms of not getting it. I'm presuming that most of the Indian side have at least one jab, if not two, which reduces the chance of you being affected anyway. We don't know by how much, but yeah, they've had a lucky escape, and thankfully we got the test match on. I mean, I get so kind of bogged down with all the rules around COVID and get some games being called off and some not. It's just all become incredibly complicated. But fact of the matter is, we're going ahead. We've got a test match, so let's enjoy it.
I mean, just a final word on that. The forfeit nature that Neil brought up earlier. There is precedent in sport. I mean, in UK sport, in football, if you can't put a team out, you basically forfeit the points, and your opposition gets them if you're COVID, afflicted. Whether it's never your fault, really, is it? But so there is precedent in sport for that to apply. I mean, it's a little bit harsh on a team that's travelled halfway around the world and has only got a finite number of people to pick from. If you start going down that route, but I got the impression. I mean, as Neil says, rumours galore going left, right, and centre. People kind of like adding 2 and 2 and making probably 28. But I got the impression the ECB weren't particularly happy with India in the first place because they attended a function that they didn't get dispensation to attend. So there's potentially a little bit of blame from the ECB towards the team India for getting. Who's got a cow in the room?
Sorry, there may be a blender going on in the other room. I'm just gonna move to.
I thought there was a cow coming in somebody's room there.
Sorry.
Yes, I mean, so there was the potential there for the ECB to be a little bit narky with India, and then if India was saying, "Well, we want to go home now. Let's kind of call this off and let's claim a 2-1 series victory," you can understand there being potentially a bit of a standoff between the two cricket boards. That was to Mark, by the way.
Sorry.
Because we've had the interruption of Neil Varani's blender. That was a question to Mark.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I say, there could have been a standoff between the two cricket boards. The ECB weren't happy. India shouldn't have gone to the function. I mean, the whole COVID world is crazy, isn't it? But who goes where, who touches what, who sees who. I mean, it's just. As long as they've probably had the jabs. We've got a test match, so let's just talk about the test match and be thankful it's on, and forget about COVID for at least another half hour, shall we?
Mark wants to move on, but I'm going to just let Neil answer the question that he was about to answer before we do.
Yeah. Look, I mean, first of all, we know that there was some kind of book launch that. Certainly, the management attended. Rumours are that a couple of the players did. Rumours are that Tom Harrison and a number of people from the ECB were also there. I think there's a certain tendency towards antagonism, especially when we have Big Three series, and it gets a little bit out of hand, especially towards the end of a series, and we see this pretty much every time. Stuff like in the last Ashes series, Steve Smith wearing a pair of glasses. Was he taking the piss out of Jack Leach or Chris Rogers? Who knows? Should Rohit have had his chicken sandwich inside because it was raining, or outside due to the strict letter in Australia? And it does get a little bit over the top. I think that there's also a little bit of hypocrisy from all sides in what their side has done compared to how they judge what other people have done. So, say England pulling out of South Africa at very, very short notice compared to what happened with the COVID bubble versus Pakistan. I think Pakistan would have been well within their rights to also just turn around and go home when the entire England team went down with COVID. And we don't know what the reason was for that, whether it was just pure accidental contamination, whether someone was a little bit silly. The fact is, we can only minimize the possibility of infection. We can never negate it without completely shutting ourselves off from the world.
Yeah.
So some level of infection is always a risk. And when you're spending this long in a bubble, the chance of something happening at some point is always going to happen.
Because it's not really a bubble, is it? Because you blow a bubble, it's completely encased in itself, whereas these bubbles aren't. It's just a phrase for it. Our friends at the Edges and Sledges podcast, we've got quite a few messages coming in, and it's bad news for Mark because a lot of it is about COVID. So I do apologise to the man in the top right of the screen. But the guys at the Edges and Sledges podcast say, did England forfeit World Test Championship points when they didn't play against South Africa? The only thing, I mean, Neil just mentioned that. The only thing I'd say on that is that was very, very early in it, wasn't it? That was kind of right towards the start of it, wasn't it? Where people didn't quite understand what was going on.
Yeah, but they were proven to be false negatives, and England didn't leave straight away. They left on their scheduled flights. They could have gone and played South Africa at least in the second or third ODI by the times that they'd found out. And also, Australia didn't forfeit COVID points when they refused to go to South Africa. No. Those games just weren't played, so South Africa didn't gain those points. No one did. They were just disregarded, and it was done on percentage of games played. So they were just treated it as no results. It could have just been the same as 5 days of rain, basically, which is what I would expect to happen here.
Sorry, now Shell's been in touch, and Shell's on every single show. He just lurks around in the ether waiting for us to start. But thank you for doing that, Shell. It's much appreciated. He says, as per England COVID protocols, close contact should be isolated. There is Rohit Sharma, Jetishwar Pujara. I mean, I mentioned Shami. All the guys that have been treated by the physio are
That's not true, though. It's not true. It's you isolate until you give out a negative PCR test if you're double vaccinated.
The negative test today means they're okay.
Yeah, they should have been isolating until they had that, because I believe all the Indian team are double vaccinated because it's done on a private medical basis in India.
Well, that answers your question, Shell. There you go. Let's move on. Good idea for Mark there. We can change the subject. Thoughts on the India and England World T20 squads, Rito? You've seen the squads, I take it, that have been announced by both England and India. Any particular surprises that you've seen?
From the Indian squad, I would say the inclusion of Ashwin was a big surprise, and the exclusion of Kuldeep and Chahal, around whom Kohli and Ravi Shastri had built that spin attack. Both of them have been excluded. That was a big shock. Now, coming to the England team, we probably knew that Ben Stokes wasn't going to be included in the team. Apart from that, it has been a pretty good selection from England. All the players have just made it to that squad.
Well, there's a Lancastrian shaking his head in the top right-hand corner there, who I imagine, Mark, I mean, obviously, Sak Mahmood has been a feature of the White Ball squad for pretty much all of the summer and the winter, I think. He's been around. He's had this side strain. The rumours I've heard is that it's actually not very good. And I would imagine the reason he's not included in this squad is because of that injury. But it's actually, I've not seen it anywhere that's been said anywhere. But Matty Parkinson, for me, seems to be a glaring omission. I don't know about you.
Well, yeah, completely glaring. Particularly, he's not even on the travelling reserves list. I mean, if you look at England's squad, they've got 6 frontline seamers in a 15-man squad, haven't they? Something going to UAE, which to me seems quite top heavy. Particularly if they're taking travelling reserves if somebody gets injured. I mean, quite how effective David Willer will be in the UAE, I have no idea. But I would have thought the pacey bowls and the lengthy bowls would be disappearing over the boundary quite a lot. Then you've got Sam Curran and blah, blah. Again, there are much of a muchnesses, which is why Mills has come back, because he offers them something different with Wood. But, you know, they should have had at least one extra spinner in there, because you could actually argue, looking at that particular squad, they've obviously got. They may have thought, well, if Parkinson goes, he's not going to play with Rashid. They're not, their view is they're not going to play 2 leg spinners together for whatever reason. So, but Moeen Ali hasn't played. He hasn't been in the England one-day teams that much over the last 18 months.
This is what surprises me, Mark, because one of the things with Team England in the white ball and Owen Morgan's vision and all the rest of it, they have been, generally speaking, pretty consistent in their selections. If you've been part of the team, I mean, David Willey missed out on the last World Cup. That was only because Joffre came in from kind of left field and replaced him. But they've been pretty loyal. They've stood by people that have played and done okay. And I don't think Matt Parkinson disgraced himself by any means. He looked pretty decent to me. So it didn't make any sense, I don't think. It's I imagine he's very disappointed.
Well, I should imagine he's incredibly disappointed, particularly not his, at least a travelling reserve. It's a far better bet than Liam Dawson, let's say, as a travelling reserve. I think, they could. I just think, if they're pinning their hopes, obviously, on Moeen, Rashid, obviously bowling, then you've got Livingston and Moeen. Well, Moeen, as I say, hasn't played that much white ball cricket for England. He's been down the pecking order a bit. Liam Livingston as a bowler is improved, but he's incredibly inconsistent in 2020 cricket. I mean, Blanks, he lost as a quarter-final the other year. He got smashed for 24 off and over. He can, he's not Mr. Reliable, and you're facing top-class batsmen. So not to take an extra frontline spinner to the UAE in your squad, I think, is dangerous for England. And the likes of David Willey, I'm not quite sure what they're seeing Sam Billings, actually. I'm not quite. He seems to get in every single squad.
I completely agree with that. I mean, I've seen him play some good innings. I've also seen him play some awful ones, and I've seen him get his team very close to the line and very often not quite get it.
We've got 3 wicket keepers in the squad, essentially, haven't they? So, and then your mate James Vince, who I actually think should be in the T20 squad, he's a travelling reserve. So I'd have flipped that around. And
I'm getting totally miscast here. There's Rita telling me I hate Josh Butler. You're telling me that James Vince is one of my mates. I've never met him. Anyway, what about you, Neil? I mean, we saw the IPL last year in the UAE, and we saw that initially in that tournament, reasonably good batting conditions towards the start, but the pitches gradually got slower and slower and lower and lower, and the scores got exactly the same. And I mean, I've watched quite a bit of cricket live out there in the UAE on various pre-season trips and stuff, and it's certainly not a high-scoring place to go to. Sharjah, maybe when they've got new strips in there, can be quick scoring because they've got short boundaries, but tends to be the slower and lower your bowlers are, the better off you are.
Yeah, I'm confused by England. Do they reckon the World Cup's going to get moved to the north of England? Because Curran, Wokes, Willey, you've got 3 swing power play bowlers in the squad for 15 men going to the UAE. You've got 1 out-and-out spinner, 2 part-time spinners who, to be fair, will both probably be in the 11. But what happens if Rashid gets injured? Then Dawson comes in. I mean, I like Liam Dawson, but he's got nowhere near the impact that a good full-time spinner is going to have on those pitches. And these are pitches where the IPL is going to play a load of games beforehand and wear them out. They're going to have no chance to refresh them properly. I mean, the only people that I'm really disappointed in are the West Indies, who have had absolutely no drama with their team that's come out today, apart from the understandable missing Narain. Pakistan announced.
You're disappointed with the West Indies because they've actually done things sensibly for once.
Oh yeah. I mean, Pakistan released their squad, and then 2 hours later, Misbah and Waqar Younis resign. Afghanistan announced their squad, and about 5 minutes later, Rashid Khan resigns as captain. South Africa have decided to drop Faf and Chris Morris and Imran Tahir and George Linder, and then posted a picture of Temba Bavuma in whites to announce a T20 squad. India's, I actually think, is very sensible, but they are clearly banking on spinning pitches, because we've got 3 seamers plus Hardik, and then 3 off spinners two leg spinners in Chahar and Chakravarti, and actually, I think that is a fairly progressive, but with the option to move back to balanced or even conservative teams. So they've got a fair number of options there.
So Chakravarti's done his gym stuff, is he? He's raring to go, is he?
Well, clearly, either that or everyone who's supposed to be testing him's currently down with COVID, so they haven't been able to get anywhere near him. but he had such a good time out in the UAE.
He's one of the stars of the tournament, wasn't he? Absolutely superb.
And I think Bairstow basically and Roy took down Chahal to such an extent when England were in India earlier this year, and the last few series. Kuldeep's already been dropped because basically he came in, he was something new. There's a whole thing in Nathan Lehman and Ben Jones's book about left arm spinners and why they do well initially, mainly because the batters haven't had a huge amount of practice against them. But he seems to have got a bit found out, especially after Mo did a number on him in the IPL a couple of seasons ago for RCB, and he hasn't been the same guy since. So India's actually seems very sensible, but with a few surprises. England confused me entirely for a whole host of picks. Most seriously, I think the missing Parkinson puts a huge amount on Adil, and he's had issues with his shoulder. That's a lot of games in a short amount of time that he's going to have to get through, and a lot of pressure, which he does thrive under. But even then, it's going to leave him nowhere to go if he gets injured.
Yeah, but I mean, you could probably say that about most white ball teams that England have put out over the last few years, because he's fairly central, Adil Rashid, isn't he, to their goings on. Two questions to you, Rita, before we move on from the World T20. Ben Stokes obviously confirmed as absent. I mean, I think they've left the door slightly ajar in terms of how they phrased it, because they don't firm up the squads until a few days' time, do they? But it doesn't look like Ben Stokes is going. To me, that's his third best format, I would say, T20. It's not, I think we've seen over the last few weeks how much England have missed him in the Test arena. Just the balance of the side is completely different without him in the side. Same kind of thing with the ODI stuff. But in the T20 internationals, Rito, Ben Stokes hasn't necessarily always been the force. Might actually be a blessing in disguise. He gets a rest, gets a chance to make himself better, and England go with a slightly new strategy.
Yes, Ben's numbers in T20 don't look that well on paper, but Ben is someone who can do miracle on cricket field, and that's why England want him in each and every single format they play, because he can win games from any situations, whether they're, say, 30 for 3 in a T20 chase or they're up against it defending a smallish total. He can do this sort of stuff. So he is pivotal to England's all three teams. That's why they want him on the side. That's why they're looking forward to hear a yes from Ben at some point.
I think that Stokes in the T20 is probably more vital in terms of his presence and maybe the effect that he has on the opposition rather than actually his performances at times, because people are kind of wary of him, despite the fact that his stats don't suggest that he's quite as good as people think he is. The other one, Rito, was Tim Al Mills, a friend of the podcast. He's been on before, old Tim Al, and his pace, his left arm stuff for Sussex Sharks, etc. I've seen him get a recall into England colours for this squad, and obviously part of that I think is down to the fact that his Sussex teammate Jofra Archer isn't around. He's going to add a little bit of pace up front and at the death.
Yes, he has worked hard after all those injuries that he has had. He has played in all these leagues abroad, and he has done excellently well for Southern Brave in the 100. That's why he has got this opportunity. And obviously, with Jofra Archer missing out for the rest of the year, that has been a welcome return to the squad for Tim Al Mills, who is an excellent bowler for England.
Shale's saying, Mark, Jofra Archer and Ben Stokes just cannot be replaced, he says. Just irreplaceable.
I don't think any cricketers are replaceable, to be honest with you. And as you say, Ben Stokes in this format, his numbers aren't that particularly great. He's actually improved as a red ball cricketer and slightly declined as a white ball cricketer in 2020. Obviously, 50 over stuff is okay. Archer, obviously, huge miss, particularly in 2020. Probably one of the best 2020 pace bowlers in the world. But, Mills has done the job consistently in different leagues. He had a bad time in the IPL and had a big price tag where he went with a big, kind of big money price tag a few years ago. But he seems to have recovered from that. They need some real pace in the side, obviously, over there. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think either of them are irreplaceable. No cricketer is ever irreplaceable, I don't think. No individual's bigger than a side.
Let's have a quick sweep round. Who wins the World Cup T20, the T20 World Cup, whatever it's called these days? Who wins it? Neil?
India.
So predictable. Rito?
England.
And you're even more predictable. Mark?
India.
You're just a turncoat. I actually think, genuinely think that you could probably make a case for 6 teams easily in terms of who can win this tournament. I think, England and India maybe are the slight favourites going into it, but anybody can win this tournament. We've seen Bangladesh have some good results on slow, low pitches. If the pitches aid them, you never know what they could produce. And West Indies, it depends how they feel when they get out of bed, doesn't it? They can be amazing. And Pakistan mercurial as well. And despite the fact they've got turmoil, but they're used to that. It wouldn't be a normal year without some sort of Pakistan turmoil going on, would it? So I think it's truly fascinating competition. It could be anybody's tournament, that one. Let's finish off then looking ahead to the next 5 days at Old Trafford. As I said at the start, this series has been superb. It deserves a proper full stop. It deserves to get Old Trafford as its kind of curtain fall. What's the opposite of curtain raiser, Rito?
Curtain fall, like you just said.
Well, okay, I was right. I shouldn't doubt myself, should I? So it deserves that. It deserves a proper full stop. It deserves for India to go away victorious if they deserve to be. It deserves for England to be punching the air if they can level at 2-all. All the rest of it. Mark, 5. I mean, as I say, terrific test matches so far. This one could be just as good, couldn't it, if the rain stays away?
Yes, you always get good test matches at Old Trafford. Good wickets. England like playing there. They've got an excellent record there recently. What I would say is that people keep saying it's going to be this pitch, it's going to be that pitch, it's going to spin, it's going to do this. The wickets there this year have actually been, pretty flat, pretty good wickets. You've had to earn your corn to get wickets, even if you're a spinner or a seamer. It has spun a bit, but not appreciably. Normally on the last day, most of the 4-day games have gone the whole distance. The one against Warwickshire last week was basically a road for 3 days, and then it turned a bit on the last day. So England are going to have, they're going to be 2 tired attacks. They're going to have to work hard because, the wicket will probably be pretty similar to the Championship wicket. But if we do get 5 great days, it'll be a good game.
So on that, Mark, if I'm making you chairman of selectors this evening, and you've seen the kind of pitches, you're our local man, you're the man on the ground. What kind of pitch are you gonna? What kind of 11 are you sticking out?
Well, they've got
What's the makeup of it? Are you playing 2 spinners? How are you going?
You've got to play Mark Wood for a start because you definitely need a point of difference at Old Trafford, without any shadow of a doubt. Would I play 2 spinners? In a normal situation, I probably would play 2 spinners, but they have seamers who are quite tired. Now, do you risk going in with 3 seamers even if it's a combination, even if it's Wokes, Anderson, and Wood? Wood can break down at any time. Because if you go in with 3 seamers and 2 of them have just bowled 70 odd overs in 3 days ago, and you've got Mark Wood who is fragile, then if one of them breaks down, then you're up the Swanee basically, aren't you? So I think.
I mean, that's a really good point actually, because you've got Chris Wokes who's only just returning from injury, despite the fact he came through the last Test match. You don't know quite how he's going to react to that. Robinson's quite a young lad and he looks quite tired. Jimmy's cracking on, etc. They've all got reasons to rest them, haven't they?
Yeah, so I think, the pragmatic approach is that they will have to go 4 seamers and a spinner because you can't take that risk with Wood in the side and seamers that are both. mean, Wilkes, instead of had injuries, Anderson's bowled a lot of overs. They're going to have to go 4-seamers and a spinner. And to be fair, Old Trafford this year, again, Parkinson has bowled the majority of the overs for Lancs. Quite often we've gone in with one spinner, and people like Luke Wells have bowled a few overs and what have you. Parkinson's done most of the donkey work. We played one game with Hartley and Parkinson in the side, I think. So, I think the pragmatic choice is to go with 4-seamers and the spinner, because, again, the balance of the side with Ali, number 7. But, I think it's going to be difficult for England. I really think it's going to be difficult, this Test match. I know India have had a disrupted preparation with the COVID situation, but I've got a bad feeling about this Test match for England. I really have. I think it could be a Test match too far for them.
Rito, would you agree with what Mark's just said? I mean, it surprised me. I mean, it didn't surprise me. That's maybe why I was surprised. But the Josh Butler coming back into the side after his paternity leave, how quickly they've just said, yeah, he's vice captain, he goes straight back in there again. Because I know people back up his performance. Mark, he's one. I mean, his overall Test record is moderate. I was surprised that they just kind of automatically said that he was coming back in, because I think it was you said earlier, Johnny Bairstow's got, I think, second most runs for England this summer. You've got Ollie Pope, who came in and looked really good in the first innings in the last Test match as well. So there's some people there that maybe don't quite deserve to be dropped for Josh Butler's immediate return.
Yeah, obviously England, they have said that Josh Butler, before this paternity leave, he was their Test vice captain, and that's why they have that word of trust in him, and that's why they have reselected him into the team straight away, coming back from his paternity leave. There is obviously something that Chris Sirrellwood and Joe Root sees in Josh Butler that we as spectators and as fans of the game can't, and his performances, his match-winning performances.
He knows where the
Test
bodies
matches
are buried, doesn't he? He knows where the bodies are buried. I'm sure he does. Yeah. No, I mean, he's a blooming good player. It's just, I mean, I think part of my frustration with Josh Butler isn't that I dislike him at all. I actually really like him, and I can see his value in white ball cricket. He's absolutely exceptional. One of the very best in the world, probably in the world 11, in both ODIs and T20s with gloves on and all the rest of it. But I just don't think he's ever rinsed out anywhere near what he can do in Test cricket. And I think probably the time's gone now. He's probably not going to get there now. If he hasn't done it in 53 Test matches, what good is another 10 or 15? Is it time to look for somebody else and maybe look for somebody that can get the best out of themselves in the future? That's the only reason. I know as soon as I say that, there's likes of Jacob on Twitter that basically send me about 50 messages to say that I am so unfair on Josh Butler. That's how I see it.
I think it'd be unfair on Johnny Bairstow to drop him, to be honest with you. I think, as he is the second highest run scorer in this series for England.
I mean, there's a low bar mark.
That's not saying a huge amount, though, is it?
He's having 29, but I mean, I think Johnny will look back at this. I mean, if he is left out, and I think he's probably the most likely to be left out himself, because I think they'll probably back Ollie Pope above him. Yeah. I think he'll look back on this series. He can't complain too much because he is only averaging 29, despite the fact that he's the second highest scorer for England. But he's made so many 20s and 30s and not kicked on, Mark. And that was his chance, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, I mentioned it on the WhatsApp group the other day. I know he got a great ball from Boomer the other day, but the same kind of technical fault is still there. He's falling over. He's looking to mid wicket. You fancy him to get bowled at LBW. And in fact, 46% of his dismissals in Test matches have been LBW or bowled. So, it shows there is a real technical flaw with him.
Impacted DRS in it, that's what he'll be saying. Neil, let's finish off with the India team. I mean, it's hard to pick this Indian side, isn't it? Because, usually coming off a win, you kind of say, great job, guys. If you're still fit enough, let's go once more time. Let's keep a winning side. But you've got injuries potentially to Rohit and to Cheteshwar Pujara. They've obviously been handled by a COVID-riddled physio as well. You've got the potential returns of Mohammed Shami, Ishant Sharma, maybe. How do you see it? Do you see Ashwin coming in? I mean, you've got about 30 seconds to answer this question. How do you see it?
All right. If they're injured, Mayank for Rohit. Vihari and a bit of a reshuffle for Pujara. I would bring in Ashwin for Siraj, who looked tired. He's played all 4 tests. And then Shami with Umesh, Shardul, Bumrah. Depends on how people are feeling. Shami's coming back off a niggle. Bumrah's played all 4 tests. If you've got 2 spinners, you may not want Shardul as the workhorse, although he does provide runs. So for Shami to come in, it depend on information that I don't have. But I would drop Siraj for Ashwin because he has looked down, bit more tired, both at the Oval and at Headingley, I thought.
I thought at the Oval, he obviously made his name at the start of this series by being so feisty and up and at him, and there wasn't quite so much of that at the Oval. Was there? Just a little bit more sort of placid, which suggested to me he was probably just tired and was kind of feeling that a little bit. Right, let's finish. I mean, I noticed today as well, it's only 10 days before the IPL resumes, and we'll be back with the IPL dailies as we go through the rest of that. Rito's desperate to get in, even the fact that we're overrunning Rito, but go on then.
Yes, James, quickly in Joss's defense, last time he played at the Emirates, Old Trafford, he put on a match-winning partnership with Chris Woakes against Pakistan. So maybe that's what they're banking on again.
There you go, Jacob. If you're watching this, I'll let him back in just to defend Joss Butler. I am balanced. Thank you very much, Rito. Thanks, Mark, and thanks to Neil. We'll talk to you again as we go through the 5 days at Old Trafford. As I say, just 10 days before the IPL resumes. We'll be back with our IPL dailies to see us through the second month or however long is left of that. Then we're into the T20 World Cup. Then it's the Ashes. And then we can maybe have a couple of days off. It's fantastic. Cricket. And we'll be back again tomorrow to talk about some more. We'll see you then. Thank you very much for listening and for watching. And enjoy the 5th Test match.